Hey guys, what is up? Ioki here bringing you a brand new patch tier list for patch 12.15. If you have never been on my channel before or don't know who I am, my name is Ioki. I am a multi-season high elo support content creator with lots and lots of experience both in solo queue and in high level tournament play, competitive play. So I've got a pretty well-rounded knowledge as to what is good and what is bad on support. So you probably clicked this video wanting to know what should you be playing to climb on this current patch. So this patch came out, my last tier list was only 2 weeks ago, so there isn't too many changes down here at the bottom, and I'm not actually going to spend most of this video talking about the absolute bottom tiers. So we'll go over them very, very briefly. These champions are absolute trash to be played in the support position. Malzahar, Annie, I don't even know why Renekton is here, but someone told me to add Renekton as a support a long time ago and to give my honest opinion on it. So he's been in tier 5 for several months. Renekton supports down here, Nunu, Ivern. Some of these champions are just champions that like people really want to be played as support or kind of can't let go of the idea of them being played as support. Things like Ivern, he's very, very supporty. He's got lots of utility baked into him, but he is pretty hard-coded to be a jungler. Annie support has been played for years and years, even though they gave like a dedicated support buff to her, like increasing her auto attack range to make her like the highest auto attack in the bot lane again. Still doesn't change anything. All of her spells are just too short range to be support. Malzahar, other than pressing R, he's just terrible in the bot lane because all of his spells automatically shove lane. But anyways, that's our tier 5. What I really want to spend the majority of this video in is going to be up in here in tier 2 and tier 1, because there's been lots and lots of crazy changes this patch and the past patches that I want to talk about. Tier 4, you are hurting your climb by playing these champions. Sion, Anivia, Camille, Poppy, J4, Malphite, Shaco, Ahri, Rammus, Volibear, MF. Now, I actually like playing some of these champions as support. Things like MF, you probably see a lot on this channel. I think she's super, super fun. That being said, these tier lists are created with the idea of that you are going to queue up in solo queue alone, playing these champions for like 100 and 200 games. And then I place them on the tier list based on how successful you are going to be over time. Can you absolutely dominate a game as Malphite support? Yes. Can you 1v9 a game as Shaco support? Yes. Is there a fun, AP-oriented J4 support build that can work? Yes. Is Poppy a decent champion to lock in as support? Yeah. But you're going to be hurting your climb by playing these champions. There's going to be tough matchups. You're going to run into people who are just playing, point blank, more efficient champions in the support role. So, again, don't want to spend too much time on tier 5 and tier 4. I made a couple of adjustments into tier 3. Now, this is where you starts getting into the fact of like play style and champion preference and champion mastery. This is the tier where you should only play these champions if you're actually good with them or if you are locking them in distinctly for counter picks. And every time I say counter picks, I need to talk about Morgana. She is the absolute queen of counter picks. As the game kind of becomes more and more complex and there's more moving pieces, build diversity, new champions every couple of months, direct counter picks in this game is kind of disappearing, especially in the bot lane where there's 4 people. So it's not like, you can lock in one champion and counter both of them. Both of those champions, one's going to be a marksman, one's going to be a support. They're going to play super differently. So it's not like there's going to be like one support that you can lock in that can disable or counter pick both of them. But when it comes to hard engaged tank supports, which we are starting to see more of because of Riot's directed buffs for the role, Morgana is just going to always be the best champion you can lock into those. And I do want to talk a little bit more about how to counterpick tank champions because Morgana, it's pretty obvious, right? You lock in Morgana and then you spell shield whoever, for instance, Leona's trying to CC. But there's also another counterpick to tanks that I think goes under, doesn't get talked about enough, and that's Galio. Galio is like the perfect champion to lock in the support role if you also need a tank. If the enemy team locks in a tank hard engage and your team also still needs a tank, Galio is like the perfect character for it. Outside of that, not super great. And that kind of goes for like a lot of these champions, right? I love playing some of these champions. Vex is one of my favorite champions in the game right now. Rakan is super, super fun. He's pretty Rakan is good to lock in if your team already has a good team comp. If you don't need dedicated engage, if you don't need a dedicated healer, shielder, peeler, he does all those things. He's just not the best in the game at them. that kind of just goes for like a lot of these champions. They are very middle of the road, but if you are good with them, for instance, I've seen some absolutely insane Taliyah supports in Challenger. I've seen some insane Neeko supports in Challenger. Swain, again, can absolutely 1v9 a game, but like there's better champions to play for like 100 to 200 games straight. So there it is, guys. If you want to hear kind of like my more in-depth opinions on any of these champions down here, you should go check out my previous tier list. I just didn't want to spend too much of this video talking about the bottom tiers because not too much has changed there. Now, there has been a bunch of change going into this tier. So we got tier 2. On this patch, Riot directly buffed Thresh, and it's a pretty decent buff. It's 1 second off of his Q cooldown, which if you land the hook is already reduced. So, you know, more hooks, more kills, right? And then they also gave him a nice little 20 damage buff at every single rank. I think that Thresh is starting to break out of that kind of trend of mediocrity that we've seen him in the past couple of months. Thresh has one of the best kits in the game, one of the highest skill ceilings for supports. Really, really cracked champion. I'm glad to see that Riot has not forgotten about him. Teemo is, I think, Teemo is the most underrated support in the entire game. He got a really nice buff last patch, and I've just always think he's been super, super good. You know, we talked a little bit about counter picks down here and how you're not always going to be able to counter both champions. Well, there actually are some lanes where Teemo can counter both champions. Playing him in the bot lane means that he automatically counters things like Marksman, right? With his blind, super, super powerful form of CC. Every single Marksman uses auto attack, so Teemo is automatically super powerful against Marksman. And then you put him against champions like Nautilus, who has an empowered auto attack to root, or champions like Leona, who has an empowered auto attack to blind, or, you know, Taric, who has a bunch of auto attacks after using spells. Teemo is low-key. Dude, I'm telling you guys, Teemo is the most underrated support in the entire game. Senna, I actually kept her. I think I moved her up to tier 2 this patch. I think that Senna is actually not quite as good. She's not reaching those highs that she was last couple of patches. You know, the nerfs definitely did hurt her pretty hard. But there's also a lot of cheese matchups, or cheese combinations that you can run in the bot lane. Things like Starving Senna. She's super, super good with the new champion Nilah. Senna Tahm Kench is always going to be absolute god tier. I've been playing quite a bit of Senna in high elo, and she definitely doesn't feel like the absolute monstrosity that she was, you know, a couple months back. She is the squishiest champion in the entire game. They lowered her base health to the point where even Yuumi is tankier than Senna level 1. Just pretty crazy. But that being said, if you're good with the champion, if you enjoy her, and if you're willing to put up the fact that you damage your team comp by locking in Senna every single game, Senna's still a pretty good champion. Pyke, much better than people think that he is. He is one of those champions you have to put in a lot of work, a lot of work to just even reach like an okay level. I think his overall win rate is below 50%, but I put him this high on the list because, one, I really, really enjoy Pyke, and I think he's such a rewarding champion to play. And two, I do think that he is one of the most snowbally and like 1v9able supports in the entire game. Just be warned that your first 10, 20 games, you're probably going to get absolutely outclassed. And outclassed is a really, really good word for Pyke because that champion falls off. He is one of the champions that falls off into the late game harder than anyone else. And speaking about falling off and getting outscaled, before we get to Sona, I do want to talk about, there's two types of getting outscaled, right? There's two types, because Sona is known as like an insanely good late game champion, right? She just has the numbers, her heal scale, her passive scales, her cooldowns get super, super low. Sona is a late game god. You know what Sona doesn't actually do super great with in late game though? Her kit. Her kit is really not all that useful in late game. She doesn't have like the playmaking that Blitzcrank or Nautilus or Thresh or Leona does going into the late game. She pretty much just has to stay as like a stat stick for her team, which is fine because once you reach into the late game, you mostly are just like running around as 5 people. So Sona is a fantastic late game champion, but she really only has the one tool, like maybe like a flash ult to get a pick with late game. So there's scaling kits and there's scaling numbers. Pyke does not have either one of those. Pyke does fall off super, super hard. Going into the next champion, we got Fiddlesticks. This is kind of like a black horse. This is a black something pick. Kind of came out of nowhere. Fiddlesticks got like one nerf, and then all of a sudden people realized that he's a super, super powerful jungler and support. He's got the fact that it's a flex pick going for him. So, you know, you can lock in Fiddlesticks super early into your draft, and then the enemy jungle doesn't know if that's a support or a jungle, which may make him like try to counter pick and then lock himself into a pick that's not ideal, because turns out it was support, not jungle. But yeah, not much else to say about him. He's very cheese oriented. You know how Fiddlesticks works. He does have a surprisingly great vision control with his effigies, because, you know, starting level 6, they can like clear out. So, you know, you can have your sight stone, which gives you vision. You can have your effigies, which gives you vision, and, you know, control wards. Obviously, just feels like Fiddlesticks controls vision almost better than like any champion in the game. But going into our first enchanter on the list. Now, last patch, enchanters took a little bit of a kneecapping, and that has been really, really interesting because it's mixed up a lot of the meta. You know, for the past like 4 or 5 months, we've just seen enchanters on top, enchanters on top, enchanters on top. Well, now we're starting to see a little bit more of a compressing of supports power level classes. So we used to have enchanter up here, tanks down here. Now it's a little closer to this. And, you know, it oscillates a little bit back and forth which one's better depending on which ones you lock in. Because, for instance, Blitzcrank is super good against squishy enchanters. Is Blitzcrank a better champion than most enchanters? Not really, but he's super good against them. So now we're starting to get into the kind of realm of it depends what they lock in. You know, a little bit of a spoiler as to what's in tier 1. Leona's super, super good against squishy enchanters. Well, a lot of people are still playing squishy enchanters, so that kind of like even makes Leona a better champion, even though she can stand on her own. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Soraka is definitely still a super good champion. She's got great lane presence, scales really, really well. She's an enchanter, right? Enchanters are always going to be inherently super, super good. Blitzcrank, we've already kind of talked about. Rel is very, very good, actually. There's a lot of Korean challenger players that swear that Rel is probably the best support in the game. I don't see it. I don't think she's that good, and honestly, she's just not fun. So I can't, you know, maybe she's better than I'm giving her credit for, but I'm not willing to play her because she is one of the clunkiest, unfun champions in the entire game. You want to know who is fun, though? Heimerdinger, bro. Heimerdinger support, believe it or not, is insanely good. He kind of has the same thing going for him with Teemo, where nobody really knows how to play against him. They're not used to seeing him in the bot lane. He's very, very econ efficient, which means that he really only needs like one item, which is pretty important as a support because you're probably only going to get 1 or 2 items. Yeah, Heimerdinger, especially as we see more and more melee champions, as Riot buffs up tanks, we're going to see more Nautiluses, we're going to see more Thresh, we're going to see more Leonas, might see a Pantheon. Heimerdinger does really, really well at being that reactive style of gameplay. Let them go in and then get one shot by your turrets and stun. Janna, second enchanter on the list. I think that most people... Janna might be bumped up to tier 1. I'm going to see how Janna performs on this patch because she does have the kind of advantage over champions like Sona and Soraka against these tank champions. Like, she can knock Nautilus out of a hook. She can knock Leona out of an engage. So I'm going to watch Janna. I think her numbers right now are slightly underwhelming, but she does have great synergy with Glacial, and she does perform really, really well against tanks. She used to anyways. We'll see how she does on this patch. Zilean is just super, super low-key OP. Another one of those champions, though, that you kind of have to be like a one-trick to really get the most out of the champion. Nautilus, still floating somewhere between good and great. Always going to be useful, very easy to pilot. I think that Nautilus is doing pretty okay right now. Renata, I might have overestimated how good Renata was. I think I put her into tier 1 last patch, and I haven't been super impressed by Renata on this current patch. So we bumped her down to tier 2. She's, you know, a half enchanter, half... I don't even know what this champion is, honestly. It's a weird champion, which makes it a little harder to estimate how good she's going to be. But as for this patch, I'm plopping her into tier 2. She's not bad. She's not amazing. We're going to talk about all the mages at once. Xerath and Brand are really, really good right now. They're 100% outclassed by Zyra, but these are surprisingly good champions to lock in the bot lane right now. And then we've got enchanters Lulu and Sona. The Moonstone nerf absolutely did hurt these champions a lot, which bumped them both out of tier 1 into tier 2. They're also going to have harder matchups going into this patch, especially Sona. You can't just like brainlessly lock in Sona every single game now. There are actually going to be people playing things like Leona, Taric, Thresh, Blitzcrank, Nautilus. Sorry, Sona, you don't just get free wins anymore. And then Pantheon, I think Pantheon's super good. Again, he's kind of like Pyke. You want to absolutely dumpster lane, roam around the map, get everybody ahead, because you do fall off pretty hard. Not in the kit department exactly, but his numbers definitely do fall off, especially if you're going to be playing in like lethality, which that's how you build him as a support. So that is our tier 2. These champions are all really good. It's kind of just a take your pick. You know, remember, it's going to go like this between great and good, depending on your matchup. But all these champions are really solid to lock in. Now let's talk about tier 1. Leona, our girl is back. There were some pretty healthy buffs given to her on this patch. The Q Shield of Daybreak mana went down by 10, and that is pretty insane because like you do a lot of early game skirmishing with this champion, a lot of roaming, a lot of extended fights. You know, level 1, the Q cooldown's only 5 seconds. So it's like per fight, you're using it at least 2 to 3 times. And, you know, that 30 mana saved, that's going to add up, right? So you can stay in the fight longer, especially with like intelligent spacing out of your skills. You know, I see way too many people press, you know, all their keys when they get a pick. You know, they E, Q, W in, and then you're kind of wasting your aftershock. So I think as people get a little more used to playing Leona again, you know, it's been a while, her win rate will go up even more. But for the first time in a while, it's actually over 50%. So I do think that these buffs are pretty solid. You know, UGG's putting her in S tier. Now that you should always trust those sites. But anyways, I got off on a little bit of a rant. Basically what I want to say is don't waste your W, let your Aftershock soak up most of the damage, and then use your W to extend how long you can stay in the fight. These buffs are very good. We got the mana buff off on Q, and then also one of the best ways you could ever buff a CC bot related champion is by extending their CC, and that's what they did for her ultimate, which is going to make some differences because sometimes you leave a very small gap in their CC and it gives them just enough time to flash out into safety, right? And then the play is ruined. So they did add a quarter second onto her R, which sounds really insignificant, but I promise you with a CC related champion, it's not. Taric has been absolutely smashing in skulls. I think this champion is way too broken. He synergizes with almost every single champion in the game. He is a flex pick between jungle and support. Absolutely insane. Easily, it's probably more like this. Taric is really good. He's got the sustain. He brings a lot of damage on his own. He's got pretty good agency. He's got a game warping ultimate. Really cracked champion right now. I can't believe I didn't realize he was this strong before. And then we talked a little bit about mages earlier. Zyra is far and above the best one. She's got the best build diversity. You can go Ludens or Liandry's. She does much better into matchups. Even her bad matchups, like she's got counterplay against. Really good. Very gold efficient champion as well because every item that she builds, her plants basically can proc. So she's proccing Liandry's from 3 screens away. Really crazy. And then even though enchanters did take a big beating last couple of patches with the Moonstone nerfs, there are 2 champions that are still absolutely god tier champs, and the reasons are they don't build Moonstone. Nami always goes Imperial Mandate, maybe goes Shurelya's if you're feeling a little newbie that day, but she always goes Imperial Mandate. So it's like the Moonstone, the enchanter nerfs didn't even hurt her really. And then Karma, there is an absolutely insane Karma build going around right now. I ran into it in high elo solo queue and I absolutely had to make a video on it. So go check out this video right here. It is First Strike Night Harvester Karma. It is unbelievable the damage that you can do with this champion. I don't recommend anybody do any Karma build that's not First Strike and Night Harvester. It will absolutely blow your mind how much damage this champion can do. And that is going to conclude our tier list for patch 12.15. I know I did a little bit of rambling today. Sorry guys, I kind of just woke up. But I had a lot to talk about. There's a lot of changes between tier 1 and tier 2. Not really much changed in tier 3, tier 4, tier 5. I don't recommend you play these champions anyway. So, yeah. So as of the current power scaling standings, I think that tank supports are much better than they were a couple of patches ago. I think enchanters are all really good, and I think mages are good. I think relatively, depending on matchup, it kind of goes like this. But I think that tanks mages, enchanters are all absolutely super playable right now. So it's a pretty good patch to be a support, in my opinion. Lots of different classes you can play as, lots of champion diversity. You know, we're not forced to be playing enchanters, but you can if you want to. You're not forced to play tanks, but you can if you want to. And my girl Leona's back on top, so it's a pretty freaking good patch. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this tier list, and I will see you guys at my stream, twitch.tv/Ioki. I'm probably streaming right now. Come check me out. Take it easy, boys. Peace.